Welcome to Cooking with Sheena. Today on the show we're going to make square Pullman loaf sandwich bread. The first thing we're going to need to do is put 2.5 cups of hot water into our stand mixer bowl. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I like to go a little bit generous on the 1/2 cup because just to give a little more, you put more flour and then you just get a little bit bigger loaves. So before we put our yeast in, you always need sugar. We're going to proof our yeast in the water so it gets all puffy and activated. We know it's good yeast, but yeast needs sugar to be able to do that. So we've got hot water, not too hot because you can kill the yeast. It's just as warm as my tap would go, and that's never been a problem for me. So it's going to be 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of white sugar. And the recipe does also call for 2 tablespoons of honey also. At one point I just stopped doing that. I found it, I was lazy, I didn't want to do that step. And it doesn't really seem to affect the bread, but you go ahead and try it out and see if that's something you like. And next, so this is going to make, sorry, let me start by telling you, this is going to make 2 loaves of, I'll show you the pan, it's quite big. I think it's like 16 inches long, I think. It's big, but this makes 2 of them. So then for the yeast, it is 1 tablespoon, and I'm going to use an instant yeast. So 1 tablespoon instant. You could also use traditional yeast as well, like a yeast that needs to be proofed in water. Instant yeast doesn't need to, but I always do it just, I don't know, feels right. So that was just give that a mix. And get the yeast all mixed in and dissolved. And then the yeast is supposed to sit for about 10 minutes till you see it get foamy. I am not patient, and it's instant yeast, so I'm pretty sure it's going to work. So usually I go ahead and start adding the next ingredients in while the yeast is doing its thing, but let's wait a little bit. I'll show you what the frothy yeast should look like when it's done, and then I'll add some of the other stuff. Okay, it has not been 10 minutes yet, but I'm just so impatient that I'm going to move ahead. It's doing its thing. So you can see it's kind of frothy, bubbling, and foamy. That's exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and add in our next ingredients, which are butter. So it's supposed to be 4 tablespoons of soft butter. I just take a big old scoop of butter, plop it in the hot water. It's going to melt and it will be fine. And then 3 tablespoons of milk powder. I don't know why. You could put milk in, but that's what the recipe calls for. We're going to get in our salt because you want to salt, season it so that it tastes good. And some oil, more oil, and then the flour. So I'm going to go ahead and add the big schwack of butter in. And I'm also going to put in 3 tablespoons of the milk powder. And I'll show you what the milk powder looks like. So butter's in there, you probably can't see it, so. It's really just powdered milk. It'll help the bread get a bit more golden also, I believe. Okay, and for salt is 2 teaspoons. And then, I don't know if I can do the oil while holding the camera, but it is 2 tablespoons of oil. And I'm going to use canola oil. You could use olive oil, whatever oil you want, I guess. But I will do olive oil and be right back. Alright, and next is the flour. So this recipe for 2 loaves calls for 6 cups of flour, and bread, if you've made bread before, you know it's kind of ish, 6-ish cups. It's more by feel and by sight and by just the whole dough makes the amount of flour you need, if that makes sense. So you add it until it's right. You don't want to under add, you definitely don't want to over add. So I always start, excuse me, I'm going to start with about 4 cups of flour in right away. White flour. This also works if you mix in some whole wheat flour, so if you like brown bread, you can do that also. So yeah, I'm going to scoop in 4 cups of flour and show you what that looks like. Okay, so there's 4 cups of flour in there, and I'm just going to use the dough hook and kind of mix it and incorporate it. I just find that if I was to just put this on the mixer, it doesn't mix very well. You get dry spots and it just doesn't mix as good. This way it's kind of like the first mixing. Make it a bit easier on your mixer and take a little less time. Okay, and then I will get it mixing. And then we're going to add the next cup of flour, a little bit at a time. You don't want to overwhelm the mixer or the dough. And let that mix in before we add more. Okay, that's what that bit that I put in looks like when it's mixed. And now I'm just going to add some more, probably about a half cup at a time. So that's 5 cups total we're at now. And same thing, I'm going to let that mix in before I add any more. Alright, so that's what it looks like now. It's mixed a bit. But maybe you can see that it's missed some of the flour, so I just like to turn it off, lower the bowl, and just kind of give it a little mix with a fork or a spoon or something. You see that flour gets trapped underneath, and then you're going to get like lumps of hard, kind of gross dough under there. And I've got my 6th cup. I'm going to sprinkle some more flour in. And we'll get that mixing also. Alright, so I just wanted to show you what's happening with the dough. It was kind of a ball while it was mixing, and it seemed kind of formed, but now you can see it's starting to stick to the sides in that spot. And it will eventually, the whole thing will be one gooey, stuck mass of dough. That means it's not ready. So we'll just keep adding flour. So I have added all 6 of the cups that the recipe calls for into the dough, and I can tell that it's nowhere near being ready. So I'll show you what it looks like. You can see maybe that it's shiny. If you touch it, it's just sticky. So what I do now is I just add flour a bit at a time. I'll just take some and I will mix it in, and I will keep doing that and show you until sorry till it's done. That's just, I've added a bit, and I'm just going to add a bit more. And I'll show you, it'll mix the flour will get mixed in, the ball might kind of come away, and then it'll smoosh out again. So it'll get more and more like what we want it to look like as we add the right amount of flour into it. See, it's starting to pull away a bit. What will happen is the whole ball of dough will pull away from the edges, and it'll just be one solid lump of dough. So I'm going to just go ahead, I'm going to add a little bit of flour at a time, let it mix, do its thing, until it's ready, and then I'll show you what a ready ball of dough looks like in the bowl, and then we'll go on to our next step. Alright, so we're getting close, not yet, but see it's more formed as a mass. It's it's not gooey and sticking. If I mix it a bit more, it might become gooey and sticky, but this is us getting close to being done. Alright, so I have a feeling it's just about done. I've just added the last bit of flour and letting it mix, so let's just watch and see. The dough should be smooth in texture, as the outside should not be like tacky looking. So this looks smooth. It's not sticking to the edge of the bowl. It might be a little tacky on the outside. One way I like to check it is to just turn it off and touch the dough, and if it still feels kind of sticky, then it's not done. So this might actually be not quite done. I'll mix it a little bit more, see if it add a little bit more flour in, and then I think we'll be done. And so in total, I think we'll be close to 7 cups of flour. But remember, we did put a little bit of extra, a little generous ½ cup of water at the beginning, so that I expected there to need more than 6 cups of flour so that it can make bigger loaves. So we're almost done. Alright, so I do believe the dough is done. It might be a bit on the... It looks like it's a bit tacky, but I don't think it will be. If we knead it by hand a little bit, it'll get a bit better and smoother. Again, I'm impatient, and I'll do it by hand. So I'm going to see if I can prop the camera up to show you kind of kneading the dough and what that all looks like. So, just a minute. Okay. I'm just going to scrape the dough out, and we're going to knead it a little bit. But before I knead it, I will take some cooking spray and I'm going to spray the inside of the bowl so that I'm going to put the dough is going to go back in and we don't want it to stick. Okay, so now I'm just going to knead the dough. It's not sticky. It's not sticking to my finger. It's soft. It's lush. That's everything we want. So, just going to. Sorry if you hear some noise in the background. That is my kids. So to knead dough, you fold it in half, and then you push it out with the palm of your hand, or the heel of your hand, and then I turn it, fold it again. And now the mixer did a lot of the kneading for us, so we only have to do just a tiny little bit. It gets a little bit less sticky as you work it, and the glutens get formed, and everything just works well. See, that's about as much as I would do. It's a nice smooth ball. It's not sticky. It's fluffy. So I just put it back into the oiled pan. Kind of coat it with the greased. Coat it with the grease that I put in there so that it doesn't get a crust. As it rises, it won't get dried out and gross. So I'll show you what it looks like in greased and ready to go. And then all we're going to do is just cover it with a towel and leave it somewhere free from draft, kind of like a warm place, where it can rise to. It's going to fill that whole bowl and it's going to dome on top. So I'll show you that when it's done. But now we just wait. It could be an hour. Usually I'd set it for about an hour. You could be impatient like me and you could rush it, but I usually do let it rise for an hour. And so that's it. We'll come back when that dough is ready to make into a... It's not been quite an hour, but the dough has risen lovely, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's domed, it's poofed. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna punch it down. We're gonna take it out of the bowl. And then I like to weigh it to make sure that I have the right size for like the loaf, because I have put in too much and the lid has burst off, and I've put in too much and it's oozed out everywhere, and I've put in not enough. So I weigh it, and I found that somewhere around 28 to 30 ounces to be good of the dough. What is that though in pounds? 32 would be 2 pounds, so it's 32 ounces would be 2 pounds, so 28, it's just under 2 pounds. It would be, oh. Okay, so it would be about 1 pound, 12 ounces, somewhere in there. So I'll show you. I weigh it. I like to make sure it's the same. The other half of the dough weighs basically the same. So now we're going to put it into, sorry, my hands are all greasy now, into the loaf pan. Okay, roll that back. Nice. Okay, so it doesn't really need to be kneaded again, but kind of just organized, and I shape into a loaf. So just kind of flattening, get the big air bubbles out, and then fold it in half and I pinch it, whatever way you think you want to form a loaf. So the top will be smooth, the bottom is all pinched together, make it a bit longer, and then I have the loaf pan. You can kind of measure it against the loaf pan. This is short, but you know what, it's going to rise. And it's going to fill up some of it, so we don't have to worry. Just pop that in there, and then I push it down to kind of spread it out even more. It really doesn't matter what it looks like, because when you're all done, I'll show you what it looks like. When you're all done and it's risen and it's baked, it's going to not look like that. So now we let this rise till it's to about an inch from the top. Then it'll be ready to bake. So I will show you that when it is risen. So it has been maybe half an hour of the bread rising, and I think it's probably ready. I'll show you what it looks like, and then it'll be ready to pop into the oven. So it's could be a little taller, but the oven has to preheat still, and it will rise when it gets into that hot oven. So I'll show you the last step for this. You may be confused because I talked about this being a square loaf, I think. I definitely mentioned a lid at some point. And you're probably wondering what that's all about. So it makes this really cool square sandwich bread, and you can make, it's perfect. I love it. My family loves it. So that is what the lid is for. So I'm just going to slide the lid on now. And that's it. You pop it in the oven. We're going to bake it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. And then usually I pop the lid off at the end of the 30 minutes and just like 5 more minutes or something, just to make it a little bit more golden on top. So when I will pop it in when the oven is ready, and I will show you what it is like when it is all done. Almost half an hour, the bread is just about done. So I wanted to show you what it looks like when I take the lid off, what the top of the loaf will look like and how filled out the loaf will be, and then it will need a couple more minutes just to be golden, unless I think it looks really good. So I will grab it and we will show you that. Okay, it looks delicious. Here we go. Yeah, so you can see how the loaf definitely filled out. You can tell that it met the lid because it's got a golden flat spot on top. It's actually not bad. It could almost be considered done now, but I'm going to pop it back in for a few more minutes, just get a little bit firmer crust on it. So, all right, I have brought it out of the oven. It's a little bit more golden. It's done. I'm going to flip it out onto the cooling rack and show you what the whole loaf looks like. So just give me one moment here. Also, with this pan, it's coated in some sort of a silicone coating, so you don't even need to grease it. They actually recommend not using any kind of a cooking spray, but you could put butter in there if you wanted, but this, I put nothing in the pan. Oh. Alright. So here we go. There Perfect. It is perfect. It makes wonderful square bread, good for grilled cheese, sandwiches, toast, everything. And I just want to show you one last thing before I go, is this will be the end of the video, but I use a bread slicer to cut it. It's just, I got it at a garage sale, so I don't know where. I think you probably get it on Amazon or anything like, something like that. And it's just a wood thing with slots. I'll just show you. You put the bread, excuse me, you put the bread in there. It's going to stick out, but that's fine. Let's see if I can show you. So the bread would be in here, and you use your knife and you just cut, and it goes all the way through. And you can see you get perfect slices. So not only do you have the perfect loaf of bread, you have it cut perfectly, and it looks like store-bought bread, but it tastes so much better. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think and what other things you'd like to see me make for you, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.